Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're here to launch Amin Guljee's monograph. It's a wonderful tome, actually, which I've been told to tell you is also available for sale. So please, once we go through it, have a buy. It's available over on the table over there. So it's a wonderful book. It's got 13 incredible essays coming at all sorts of different angles. We've got Mariam Akhtiar, who is a curator at the Met, Robert Sagem, and some very, very interesting insights and analysis, as well as some wonderful, wonderful photos of Amin's work. And it courses his trajectory for the 3 decades that he's been active. So I highly recommend it. I've been through it myself and was also sort of involved in the process of making this book, and it's been a labor of love for Amin. So highly, highly recommend. And as I said, it's available for purchase at the table over there. So, Amin, you wanted to call this an interrogation. So you got to turn on your mic. Yeah. It's on now. Okay, so now we can begin your interrogation because your mic is on. Okay.
Ask me, baby.
Okay. So, Amin, in your work, form and structure plays a huge, huge role. But I've also noticed that you've been involved more in writing, becoming more interested in writing. So how does form and structure play a role in your monograph as well as your work?
Yes. See, in my process, being an artist is not wonderful. Can you turn off the phone wherever the noise is coming off? Can you please turn it off? Otherwise, I'll break it. I promise you. I'm a performance artist.
Some manners, please.
Yes.
Bit of etiquette would be nice.
Yes, so thank you. Thank you. Please button kar dein. Thank you. Okay, form and structure, right? So it's interesting because I'm not legacy. I never wanted to be an artist. I studied economics at Yale. And it's only because I went to a class in art history freshman year that I started sort of like taking a lot of art history classes. And I did a second major in art history where I specialized in the Islamic gardens. And that sort of like brought me towards the arts. So this was a really uncomfortable thing for me to enter the arts. And this is something my parents also didn't want. That's the only thing they ever asked of me. Don't be an artist. And I agreed with them 100%. And I really fought hard not to be one. And it's interesting, when I work, so, it's a terrible way of making a living. It's horrible through your work. It's terrible. But what makes it worthwhile is the process. Because the process is fantastic. It's beyond any kind of substance you could possibly take. It's amazing. You lose yourself. It's a moment of transcendence, and that is brilliant. And yes, structure, right, Adam? I love structure. I love structure. And when I work, I have to read. I constantly read. Because books also have structure. Stories have structure. You go through time and space, and that is fantastic for me.
And in your monograph, how does the structure work in the monograph?
So the monograph was an open party. It was a party. I envisioned it as a party. I asked 13 people. I invited 13 people to my party, and I said, you can wear whatever you want, and you can speak about whatever you want. So it was an open party to say whatever they wanted to say about me. And they did. And there were no overlaps. So I was really excited about that because everybody has a very different voice.
So if I can press you a little bit more, also you've got a multifaceted trajectory, which involves curating, performance, installations, as well as the sculpture. So how did you think about structuring that when in the images, in the work? Because it's not easy, because it's a continuum rather than a linear progression, right?
Yes, it is a continuum. Everything I do intersects, interrelates, there are no separations in my life. And there are no separations about how I live and my work process and what I do. I think honesty is so very important. I have to be. And the way I structured it it's quite simple. I divided it, but then when you look at it, when you look at the book itself, there's so many overlaps, interwoven stories within the book itself.
To structure, everybody, excuse me, mind me for my voice, not the best.
Oh, Lauren, be tall.
In the structure, there is a repetitive philosophy of Buddhist and Islamic influence that comes into your work.
Yes, repetition is fascinating for me. My father was a great calligrapher, and he could write in all the great styles. I do not consider myself a calligrapher. I take a more conceptual approach towards calligraphy. In my calligraphic work, what I do is I use one line in one particular script, and I've repeated that over 37 years. And what I'm playing with is form. So that is what I'm interested in. In my early works, I studied art history at Yale, and I was dying to sort of like try to discover works from my part of the world. But at my time, there were no classes for that. So when I came back from university, all I wanted to do was like to discover the objects I'd grown up with. My parents had a great collection of antiquities, and I would play with them. I would speak to the Gandharas, I would caress the Krishna, I would look at the Ganesh, I would look at bowls emblazoned with bronze and copper inlay from Damascus with text, Islamic text on them. Those are the objects of my childhood. And those, in my early works, I wanted to capture those and sort of like incorporate them in my mythology.
Going to capturing, what are your thoughts on documentation and the importance thereof of it?
Since I did art history, I think documentation is so very, very important, especially for us. I remember I was curating the first Biennale in Karachi, and there was a German lady, Auntie G, who was the producer of the Berlin Biennale, who'd come very kindly had come down to Karachi. And she was being a little flippant about documentation, and I strongly disagreed with her. She said, "You don't need catalogs." I said, "No, we do. Perhaps in Germany you don't need catalogs, but we need catalogs in Pakistan. We have to write our own history. Our history cannot be written by others." I have a gallery space, as you know. It's a non-commercial space in Karachi. And once a year we have shows. And we did a show in the 1970s where you did one fantastic performance work for me, Sara. And it was funny, looking back in the 1970s, it was so hard to find things. There was so little written. You had to really look. And I think we should leave behind more documents, more testimonies. So, our history, it remains.
And in the process of you making this document, your monograph, what were your trials and tribulations that you might have gone through?
Oh, God. I am not sentimental. I hate looking back. It was horrible. Looking back at your own shit, you're like, ah! It's not pleasant. But yeah, it was really difficult.
But it's not just the monograph. I think it's also the Gulgee Museum, which will be open to the public on the 19th of February. So just a quick plug for that. I highly recommend that people go to that as well. That's a very significant thing. We don't have many museums in Karachi, and I think that we don't have any museums of art actually at this point in time officially, and we don't have anything covering the modernists in that way. And also with your gallery, which has your work, that covers the sort of transition from modernism, your father, into the contemporary. So it's a really, really interesting experience. Again, 19th of February. But for you, Amin, it's been these last 2 years, it's been the monograph, the museum, and the memoirs. So you've been a very reflective period of time, and like what now you're coming out the back end of it.
It's all so depressing. I'm so old now. I feel like Moses. It's so depressing. Yes, and 2 years ago, I turned to myself and said, Amin, either you show your father's work or you sell it. But you can't, they're dead now. They're not coming back. You can't just be in limbo. Ever since their murder, my place was sort of stopped in time. I mean, my gallery functioned, I continued, but their place I just bought. I didn't sell any works and I just shut it all up. And so 2 years ago, I said, Chalo, Bismillah, let's attempt to open it. So for 2 years, I've been working with my architects, Sabina and Jarwala. And we've been working to renovate their space and convert it because my parents had a museum, but they lived there as well. But now it's just a museum space. So it had to be rethought, all of it. And so she's been wonderful to work with. And inshallah, on the 19th is the opening of the museum. And I beseech you all to come and see my father's amazing work. And I hope, and I'm curating the collection as well. And I hope to God I've done justice to it. Yes, and the memoir, oh God. Yeah, I'm super old, right, guys? This is a strange project that happened this summer. My writing has gotten more confessional, I guess it's the age. And I've been, my curatorial text. So this summer, I was very lucky to be accepted into a residency where you cannot apply to it, you have to be sort of like nominated into this residency. In Recollet, it is a residency of artists and scientists. My studio was next to an Indian nuclear physicist, and which was weird. And so I started writing my tell-all, and I call it Glitch, the story of me, but that's still a long way to come.
Coming back to this book of yours, your monograph, this has been a time of great retrospection for you. How many years did it take for you to write this?
What?
Your monograph?
No, my monograph took 3 years to do. Kiran Ahmed is my designer, who was fabulous to work with. And John McCary is the editor. And it took 3 years to put together. And I was really happy that Sara, which is an Italian publisher, picked up my project and is publishing my monograph for me.
What do you hope for people to take away from your monograph?
Me. You take me away. And I hope you caress me and touch me and flip through me.
This is your chance, guys.
Amin is for sale over on that table over there. So we actually have Sara, who's a performance artist over here and does a lot of work in the performance space. I was wondering, how do you see performance and documentation tying together in your monograph?
Well, see, performance is... Sara, I have to give her a bit of a resume. The lady sitting on the right of me has been teaching performance art at the Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture for...
the last 11 years.
11 years. And it's the only class on performance art in Pakistan. And she's much loved. And a big round of applause for her.
Thank you. Thank you.
See, I'm super old. So I met her a century ago when we were doing a show called Fresh, which were artists under the age of 30. She'd just graduated from St. Martin's and she'd come to me and I'm like, this woman is amazing. And we remained, and the boy on my left, I mean, I don't like young people, but for some reason I'm surrounded by them. Adam Fahy-Majeed came on board during the Karachi Biennale. He called me up, I knew his father, and he said my son would be interested in working for the Biennale, and we had a talk. And I said, I don't like the 1%, they tend to be lazy. I have no faith in you. But he came on board, and he was amazing. And he fit into a team, it's like he'd always been there. And after that, we started working on project after project after project.
Yes.
I worked with Sara for project after project after project.
We have
worked a lot together, yes.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, and I think the projects are like multifaceted, right? So there's been performance projects, the Q rickshaw, so that's kind of mixing public and performance art, which was also a very interesting project.
Oh, can I talk about the Q rickshaw?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Please.
so I have this. I love rickshaws, right? I mean, for me, they're like it's like urban freedom. It's where you sort of like, you know, you can have a Mercedes, but it gets stuck in the bazaar. But a rickshaw can just navigate through. And it's like, bye-bye. And it's so cool. I love rickshaws. So I've created my own rickshaw out of mirror and steel, and I have my own rickshaw. I use it in the mornings to go swimming in, and my chap drives me there in my rickshaw, and I wanted to do a performance work within it. So I got Adam on board. We co-curated a project called the Q Rickshaw Project. Now, in the Q Rickshaw Project, we asked about 11 performance artists to do performances in the rickshaw. And I didn't want to go through the bourgeois area of Karachi. So we started at Empress Market, where there was a Sepoy Revolution, and they built a nice market, because we have to forget about that nonsense. And then it went to Qaeda Adam's Mazar. So we began there and we ended at the Mazar. And 11 performers came in and out of the rickshaw. And it was wonderful, and Sara was one of the performance artists who participated. And in my monograph, I have one more thing. I not only have the QR codes with each project, so you get a video of the performance and a catalog on the work.
You know what is also really great in his monograph is, because it's spanning over 30 years, you can really tell different eras. Say, for example, during the COVID times, Amin likes to call it the Corona Chronicles, you can really see what was happening in history, and therefore the power of documentation as well of what was happening in those particular times.
Yeah, it's fun. The virus, I mean, people might have died in it, but it was really productive for me. For some, we had kind of quarantined all together, all three of us, and we put out something called the Trojan Donkey. And we asked like 80 odd artists globally, because everybody was sitting at home doing shit. And we had everybody's attention. So we asked about 80 artists to contribute a work that we put out on the controversial Facebook platform at a certain point. And it was interesting. You know, it chronicles the time.
Yeah. So different ways of addressing art and how to navigate it.
So you mentioned, Amin, that we actually met
in a dark alley, Adam.
Yeah, in a dark alley at the Karachi, working on the Karachi Biennale.
Yeah. So the Karachi Biennale was a dark alley.
But why I was interested in that, because I thought it was, I mean, I was studying in university at the time, and I thought, you know, this is a very interesting project because Karachi needs these sort of things. And Amin straight away struck me as a figure who sort of represented Karachi and also shows a very interesting side to the city that maybe from outside people don't really understand. Now, I'd like you to, now we're at the Karachi Literature Festival, and thank you very much for having us, by the way.
And thank you for coming.
And thank you all for coming. But I'd like you to speak to the presence of Karachi in your work, in your process. You were talking about the Q rickshaw, but it comes through in the sculpture, in the performance, in the curation. It suffuses everything in your work. You know?
Yeah, Karachi is an interesting place. It's time is elastic in Karachi. It's the past, present, and future all combined together at the same time. And there's an energy to this place. There's an energy. We are not a beautiful city. Lahore is beautiful. It has the grandeur of the Mughals. But we have energy and a certain resilience. We are the cockroaches of Pakistan. You know, we really are. And it's so funny, you know, that's why the Biennale was so important in my context. It was the first Biennale because we don't, unfortunately, have museums. I mean, this is the great sadness of our city. Where is a museum of contemporary and modernist art? We have Mohattab Palace, which is amazing, but it does not have a permanent collection. And there's a great need. So when the Biennale came around, I thought this is marvelous. Let's make it as large and as diverse and as challenging as possible and bring all of these great works to Karachi. And we had about 80 foreign artists And we navigated the whole problem of customs because it's impossible to bring artworks in because the customs will drive you crazy. So what we did is we went to very respected artists and said, listen, why don't you come yourself and set up your installation in Karachi? And we will try to give you whatever backup there is. And we did that. We worked with artists over a period of the last 2 years. And everybody worked for free, by the way. It was all volunteer. This was all like child labor. You know, they all work for free, and I'm horrible to work with. And so they all came and they worked, and we worked with each individual artist to create the work so in Karachi. And from the Pakistani artists, I got such generosity. Because I had no money, I had no budget, I wanted these ambitious installations, these ambitious works, and people came through for me. And it's the power of the art scene here. And I'm so grateful to that.
So one of your bits, Amin, is that I hate young people.
I hate young people.
I've heard that.
You don't need Botox.
I've heard that so many times. But you work a lot with the emerging and young artists. And I think that one thing that I think is under-recognized, I guess, in the artistic community here is that so many of emerging artists have actually worked with you, and you've been, you know, a really good mentor for them. So
I don't know whether I've been a good mentor for them.
No, I mean at least you've given them a
the only
platform
piece of
and an
advice
opportunity.
I give them is never listen to anything I say. You know, really. No, but you know what's interesting, Adam, is I didn't want to be an artist because I knew how difficult it was in any context. But it's even harder in Pakistan, you know, to be an artist. And I see all of these schools in Pakistan and all of these people going to art schools. And the schools are amazing, but what happens to these people once they graduate? What happens to them? There is no support system here. You know, and it's difficult. I mean, if I had a child who wanted to be an artist, I'd chop him up into little pieces. You know, like, no way in hell, dude. No, but it's so difficult. It's so difficult. And again, I don't do it for any noblesse oblige. I just do it like anything in my life. That's why I'm calling my memoir Glitch. It just happens.
What about your book? Can we talk a little bit more about the way you've divided it into the sections? So there's a section on curation.
Right.
And then there's on performance art.
So I have put
a little bit more.
Okay, sure. So I have put my entire practice into this book. And since it's really, everything for me is interconnected. My curatorship is connected to my performance work, it's connected to my statics, my sculpture, everything is interlinked. So I use sculptural pieces in my performance works, where they perform the mask, they dance the mask, they become the mask. So everything, so I had to put it all down there. And that's why you have all these sections and you have all of me, whether you want it or not.
And so I see like an interesting confluence happen in your installation work, because these are like living objects. You often have performance involved with it, but you come and conceive a whole installation. Can you talk about how you approach space and inhabiting space with your sculptures?
Yeah. I mean, see, I work in form, and anything off the wall is fantastic for me. And an object is amazing. It's not like a 2D painting. It has a myriad of perspectives around it. I find objects just, amazing. And, you know, when you do an installation, I'm very, very, very aware of where it's placed. It has to be absorbed in the architecture of the place. You know, it has to be absorbed, it has to belong there. And it must seem almost like it's always been there. I have this strange fantasy about my installations. Like, I did one in Rome in 2018 at the Museum of Modern Art of Rome, Gallery of the Art Moderna of the city of Rome. And it was a beautiful courtyard. It was a cloister. And I set up my garden over there. And, you know, and it fit. And then other installations like the one we did in Chicago, where you were curating me, in the South Asia Institute in Chicago. And we had set up the installation, and I wanted to do a performance to activate my installation. So I called it The Kiss of the Spider Woman, where I collaborated with 18 people, artists from Chicago, dancers, old schoolmates from Yale. I had one of my schoolmates from Yale, Anane, who's Nigerian, who's a 10-year professor at the University of Austin. And she went around asking people, what's your sexuality? And then she would write it down in the book. And yes, and so we and then we had Irene, who was, again, wearing my mask. And it creates a kind of strange narrative, which I'm very interested in.
So Alan Capro had wrote this really interesting line where he says, there is no line between art and life. And I feel like Amin's life is like a true testimony of that. His life is performance art. And so if you go through his book, you can very well see that as well. The different stages of him, of his work, all actually being who he is right now.
Yeah, and they're distinct moments in time. Yes. So I think some of the crowd will remember the 90s, which was a crazy era in Karachi, Pakistan. You were doing a lot of sort of work with the fashion, with jewelry, and you kind of track that, and then it moves into the thousands when you open up your gallery. You start working a lot with the artistic community, and you can kind of track the process and the progress that throughout your career. So would you speak to that time when you came back from America?
Cow, yes.
In the 90s.
John thought we were coming back for 3 months. I didn't think, because I got my degree in economics and I had 4 years of grief. And, art history I won a prize for, but that was fun, but economics was not. So I said, I'm not making any more plans for my life. I'm just not going to do this. So when I came back, basically, I spent 3 years after graduation in New York. I was doing jewelry. I was trying to hawk my stuff on West Broadway. There were a lot of places selling art jewelry. And I would hawk myself shit there. And then I came back home because I wanted to make objects. And I knew my parents had a backyard which was free. So that was like, yeah. And so I came back home, and it was a crazy time. I came back home, and there was a civil war happening in Karachi. There was democracy and a civil war, and but we were young and just like and full of beans. And I remember going to Ali Imam Saab. At that time there was one gallery in town, and that was Imam Saab. And I said, Imam Saab, will you have my show of sculpture? And he said, no, beta, sculpture's controversial and it doesn't sell. And I'm like, but I didn't give up, and I harassed him for like 4 months, maybe 6. I harassed him, and I harassed him, and I harassed him, and then finally he gave up and gave me a show, and that was my first show, and that's when the craziness started, my career, and it was funny because my mother came to me because she was really upset. I did well academically, and she's like, for bloody hell, you're going to be an artist? And then she turns to me and says, Beta, do you want to live off your father's money for the rest of your life? I'm like, no! My parents are both self-made. They're very cool people. They were very cool people. And I'm like, no! And she said, Beta, I spent my entire life with one artist. I don't need another in my life. And I really felt for my mom. I really felt. But my father just didn't care because he was an artist. He's more interested in his own work. And I gave myself, and that was important for me to pay my own bills. It was because my parents were incredible. And, and they're self-made. And that was so important for me. And I said, I give myself 3 years. If I can't hack it and I can't pay my own bills, then like every good Yaley, I'll go to law school or business school. You know what I mean? That's my way out. So I've given myself 3 years. And I hadn't even considered art school. I just said, I'm going to just start. If it doesn't work out, I'll go to law school.
So, coming from that part of your trajectory into a more difficult period for you in the aftermath of your parents' murder, but it was an incredibly productive time, I mean, ever since you've just been churning out work, and you've always said a very interesting thing to me. You say, "I don't trust therapists. Art is my therapy." So could you speak to that, please?
You know, like my parents' murder was perhaps the most difficult moment in my life. I thought everything went black, and I just didn't think I could go on after that. And luckily, shukr alhamdulillah, I had 2 shows already, they were already in the pipeline. One was in Malaysia at the Petronas Museum, and the other one was in Dubai at Art Space Gallery, the DIFC. And thank God those were there, because I had to work. And my back had completely caved in, so I would sort of like hobble. I was in pain, but even that pain was good, because I think the pain kept me sane. The pain, the extreme physical pain was also I'm grateful for, because I think it somehow grounded me and didn't make me lose control. And then I would just hobble to my workshop and I would make my shit. And that kept me sane and kept me going.
And in the museum, it's very interesting. You've actually made a couple of works very specifically for the museum, and one is called Heaven's Door.
Oh yeah, I was thinking, what are you talking about?
And also a self-portrait connecting you and your father. Do you want to speak about these works?
Sure.
I think they're really exciting.
It's like, Adam, I didn't do any work. This is all my father's stuff in the museum. No, I did. I made the doors for my dad's museum, for Gulgee and Sara. I made them gates. And I called them Heaven's Door, like knock, knock, knocking on Heaven's Door. And they're off text, and I made my doors for them. Yes.
And a self-portrait as well. So, and I also find this quite interesting for you when we're talking about art is your therapy.
Yes, it
that
is,
actually
Adam.
the self-portraiture is a really good example of that. Is one of the threads that ties together your work.
You know, I would recommend this to everybody in the audience. Chop your face up into many small pieces and reassemble it. It's wonderful. You know, it really is. You know, cut your face. You know, it's great. I get, you know, that's the thing. We have Jimmy Engineer Saab here, and he understands. Like, it's everything, right? Art is everything. It's your joy, it's your sorrow, it's your angst, it's your questioning. It's everything. And in the true process, you know, when things are actually happening, because a lot of times I work, I'm very structured, you know, and I work. And a lot of times when I'm working, nothing happens. And it's frustrating. And you're like, you should be selling barn. What the hell are you doing in the workshop? And you're angry. And, you know, nothing makes sense. And then there are other days where everything falls into place by itself. It looks like it's happening itself. And you're this octopus. And it's all just combining itself. And that's why it was so weird to look at the old shit. It's like, wow, I did that.
and do you want to speak to the, like, specifically to the process, because you're kind of speaking around it, but the the actual process itself is a sort of, as you said, a moment of transcendence.
Yes.
But it's working with a very specific material, mostly copper.
Yes.
So
metal.
So what drew you to the metal, and what is in that moment in time, in that space, how is the process manifesting itself with the metal?
See, I'm an old man, Adam. I've been working, and I'm really not into post scale. I'm into scale, and I've been working with this medium for a long time, and I'm obsessive. I've been working with copper for so long now, and so, you know, technique is something, you know, you develop, because, you know, how I learned my craft. When I first came back, my parents, like my mom, was really not enthusiastic about me being an artist. And so I would go to Jamshed Road, and I would sit with the welders. It's by KDA where I'd live, and Jamshed Road is where they dent the cars. And I'd go there and I'd sit with the dentists and the welders over there that were working on cars. And between 12 and 4 o'clock, because that's when they were the cheapest and they could help me and they could teach me. And that's where I learned my craft on the streets of Karachi. I went to the American school. So I went to, my entire life, I was in a class of 20 people, 10 were Americans and 10 were Pakistanis. It was very elite. Then I went to Yale. And then I'm suddenly back in Karachi and I'm on Jamshed Road. It was for me like, wowzer. Because metal workers, it's a whole different society. They smoke heroin. You have these guys with chains. And, at 4 o'clock, it was a busy road. It wasn't like, oh my God, it was quiet. There were people everywhere. And, there were street urchins and malungs and, people. And you have a really different section of society. And they would ask me questions like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? I'm like, these are all very good questions. And I don't want to answer them.
But was there a particular reason as to why you chose working in this medium?
Yeah. I'd done a stupid science web project in high school using copper, and I was fascinated by the material. So because my father never attempted jewelry, done just about every other bloody thing. He'd never made jewelry, so I started with jewelry. And my first pieces were so heavy that most people who have collected them, they're just like an earring 2 kilos heavy, like a little unbearable.
I mean, one more question.
Okay. Hi.
So, any advice for burgeoning artists as to how to intersect and bypass into the art world?
Oh God, first piece of advice, don't be an artist. Really, it sucks. But however, if you have to be, because sometimes you have to be, that's the problem. You have to be. You have to make the shit. Like, these objects in my head demand to be made, right? They don't leave you alone till they come out of your body. That's why I call it shit. They demand to be excreted from you. They demand it. There's these furies. And if you have those furies in your head, then believe in yourself. There are always fashions in time in art. And sometimes you're not with the fashion of the times. But believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. And, and there are no mentors. There are no mentors. You can only have yourself there. And that's one thing I love my dad for. And I remember him a lot because I'm doing his stupid museum and I'm thinking about him a lot. Gulgee and Sara, both of them, they were a partnership. And you know what? The most beautiful thing he gave me, when I was starting out, I would always go and say, it's my first show with Ali Imam. Dada, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Well, I'm doing it. He's like, Beta, when you finish, show it to me. And I'd be really hurt. But he gave me that space to discover my own voice, to discover my own vocabulary. And he allowed me to be, and that was marvelous. So I just say, just follow your own star. Follow where you, again, it should come from the gut. I'm old-fashioned,
So I think that's a wonderful note to finish on. But I just one last question. So I know. Just a nice softball. A nice softball.
Okay.
Okay.
Hardball.
Okay, hardball. So you're talking very much from a personal perspective, but in the Pakistani context, what is the importance of art, and what kind of things can you actually, messages and sort of escape can you actually have for these young artists who are coming through? What can art actually offer them as well?
What can art offer them?
Yeah.
See, art doesn't offer you anything. It just takes. It takes everything. I mean, if you are an artist, it takes everything from you because it becomes your one and only priority. It becomes everything. it doesn't offer any, it only offers you perhaps therapy, sanity. It doesn't offer anything. And, art, I think, is really important. I mean, one thing Hitler did, and Hitler was a very smart man, whenever he'd conquer a country, he'd take away the art of that country. Because if you take away the art, you take away the soul of a country.
Excellent. I think that was wonderful, Amin. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank you all. Thank you so very, very much for listening to me.
Please buy the monograph.
It's called No Man's Land.
Thank you, everyone.
That's me on the cover, wearing one of my masks.